Okay, radiation protection. All right, so again, we are dealing, especially in diagnostic radiology, the diagnostic levels that we're dealing with in radiation exposure is very low. However, what we're more concerned with is not the one-shot deal of the one-shot exposure. We're more concerned with the cumulative dose because we're doing this as a profession. So when you're looking at the accumulation of it, we're talking about the minimal doses that we are receiving from radiation on a daily basis on the job. Eventually, they will add up, and this is what we're trying to be careful of, is making sure that we don't exceed those type of doses. If you do understand the radiation aspect of it, you can do this for as long as possible. Like I said, I've been doing this close to almost just slightly over 25 years now, and I'm still a practicing tech. I teach 4 days out of the week, and I'm still working in the cardiac cath lab in interventional radiology. Bless you, 1 day a week. Okay, but I've been doing this for many, many years, and I'm able to do so because I understand it. So what we got to do is we got to control the amount of radiation that our patients are receiving, which in turn, that if we are able to lower our patient doses, aren't we also lowering our our technological dose as well? Okay, so it's kind of a tumbling effect there. Now, over 90% of the average population exposure comes from man-made radiation. And what we're talking about here is we're talking about X-rays. So the exposure that we're receiving, 90% of it, is coming from X-rays. Okay? We all know that although X-rays can be deleterious, as long as we maintain good practice, it outweighs the benefits of receiving radiation. Remember the video that we saw prior to that? Everything was guessed. The doctors had to guess the prognosis, what was wrong with the patient, okay? Because we couldn't see what was going on the inside, and as soon as the discovery of X-rays came about, this is where, well, first of all, it was a good thing, but it also brought about what they say, the onus of malpractice suits, because now they were able to prove a misdiagnosis from a physician. But let's also look at it, the good side is without X-rays, we cannot make a good or near accurate diagnosis without the use of medical imaging. Okay? Greater than 30% of the exposure that we are receiving through man-made radiation, again we're talking about X-rays here, can be eliminated without compromise of the benefits. Up until this point, we've talked about the improvements in X-ray equipment. We've talked about the 3-phase generators, intensifying screens, the speed of film, computerized radiography. Okay. Everything that we've done so far has benefited our patient. We're getting good quality images while maintaining or even lowering the amount of exposure that our patients are receiving. Okay. What we're going to be talking about now here is radiation safety precautions. How is it that we're going to protect our patients, and how is it that we can protect ourselves from these type of exposures? First of all, let's talk about repeat radiographs. Repeat radiographs occur because of variabilities, and these variabilities can account for poor patient positioning. Okay? We are three-dimensional. But what we're doing is we're taking two-dimensional images. So we have to take our radiographs very specifically. It's not like this, straight on front to back or straight on back and front. We have to position our patients in a certain angle and also angle our tubes in a certain way to visualize the structure of interest. And if we don't position our patients properly, if we don't position our X-ray tubes properly, we end up with improper patient positioning. And if we can't see what we need to see, what happens?
Gotta do it again.
You gotta go back and do it again. Okay? And what does it mean every time you have to do it again? What happens to patient exposure?
It goes up.
That's also going up. Okay. Selection of exposure factors. The tools of our trade is MA, time, KVP, distance, grids. Okay? All those different things come into play, and if we are not applying our selection of exposure factors correctly, you get an image that's either too light or too dark, too contrasty, not contrasty enough, okay, loss of detail, too much detail. You guys see where I'm going with this? Okay? So again, this thing, poor selection of exposure factors, can also obscure our images, and if we can't see what we need to see, we got to go back and repeat it again, which means repeat exposure on our patients. And then improper use of collimation. Okay, we've already talked about that. Okay, bottom line is anytime you repeat a radiograph, the patient is being re-exposed. Every time you expose the patient, you're doubling their exposure. You're also increasing your chances of getting the secondary exposure. Okay, you know what I mean by secondary exposure, right?
Scatter.
Scatter radiation is like secondhand smoke. Okay, you're not smoking, but you're inhaling the smoke from somebody who's smoking at 10, 15 feet away. Is it still damaging?
Mm-hmm.
Still damaging. Okay? All right, so our repeats. With film, our number one repeat for film is our technical factors, either too much or too little. Okay, our film is going to come out too light or too dark. We got to go back and repeat it again. That's number one. Number two is patient positioning. Okay, so those are the two top reasons of repeats in film radiography. Okay. Technical factors number one, patient positioning number two. Now for computerized radiography, we've eliminated the exposure part of it, right? This is at number one over here because now we've got the computer, we've got software programs and mathematical algorithms that figures out the just right image for us. If it's too dark, it adjusts for us. If it's too light, it'll adjust for us. Okay? But our images always come out great. Remember the sample I gave you with the two series of knee x-rays? One was with film. Every time we manipulated our technical factors, it got darker, 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 and then darker. Okay? Whereas with our computerized radiography, even with the increases in technical factors, I increased it almost 40 times, and it still looked as good as the first image. Remember that? Okay? So we've eliminated that part for computerized radiography, but we haven't eliminated the part positioning. So now that becomes number one for computerized radiography. Okay? So, in essence, keeping repeat rates low, again, we're talking about the tumbling or snowball effect here. We are also going to be keeping our patient exposure low to our patient population. It reduces any unnecessary wear and tear on our x-ray equipment. Every time we have to do a repeat, we are using our x-ray equipment unnecessarily. So it puts additional wear and tear. Okay? With that said, every time we have to do a repeat, we have to go back and run it through our processors, and it's utilizing more chemicals. Bottom line is, if we are able to do our patients efficiently without any repeats, that means no additional waiting time for our patients in the waiting room. Okay? Happy patients, more referrals, more money comes into the hospital, more money comes into your pockets, hopefully, right? Okay, we're talking about the effect here. But the less time we're spending with our patients, because we're efficient, we can see more patients coming through. Okay, and then everybody's happy. All right, let's talk about this population. A general population is in pediatric radiography, in which we have to be very, very, very mindful of patient exposure, especially with the very young population. So although the doses that we are using is relatively low, children are going to be more sensitive to radiation. I'm going to explain this to you here in just a little bit here. So children are more sensitive to the effects of radiation. Why? First sentence here, it says, first bullet point, says higher rate of mitotic activity. What are we referring to here in mitotic activity? Okay, we're talking about cellular division, right? So with the younger population, we know, first of all, that X-ray is damaging at a cellular level, right? It causes ionization. So let's just say we shot an X-ray on a child. Okay, we caused some damage to the cells, all right? And with cells that are rapidly dividing, when the cells divide and they're damaged, they're going to pass on that damaged information to the next cell, okay? Because they're rapidly dividing, they're carrying the same misinformation. And it continues and continues and continues and continues. You follow what I'm saying? Okay? Whereas when adults, okay, if we cause damage to the cell, they're going to have time, those cells are going to have time to recover before they divide. Therefore, the damaged information doesn't get passed on. Does that make sense? So this is why we're concerned with children, because they are rapidly growing. Everything is growing, dividing, replicating, multiplying, whatever. Okay? But it's constantly in division. So what we're trying to do is making sure that we don't cause any damage to their cells, again at the cellular level, because of their rapid division. So this falls under what's known as the law of Bergoni and Tribondeau, which says that cells that are rapidly dividing have a potential for rapid division and are more sensitive than those that do not rapidly divide. Okay? Because if they get damaged, they're going to pass it on to their daughter cells, and then those daughter cells are going to transfer it to the next daughter cells. Radiation doses to children then must be kept to a minimum. So first of all, let's talk about gonadal shielding. Okay, this is how we're going to be talking about how we can decrease some of this exposure. First one here is gonadal shielding. We're talking about shielding what here, guys? Ladies?
Genitals.
Okay, reproductive organs, your testicles and the ovaries. Okay? Here's the thing, and here's the misconception. When we are shielding our patient, we are not shielding our patient to protect them. Guess who we're protecting? Future generations. The future generation. We're protecting the future offsprings. This is the whole purpose of shielding our patients. Okay? So, a minimum of 0.5 millimeters of lead equivalency, lead is Pb equivalency, must be used whenever it does not interfere with the examination. So if we're x-raying, any body parts, okay, we're constantly just shielding our patients, just making sure that they're protected from the primary beam as well as scatter radiation. Okay, and if it doesn't interfere with the procedure, we're going to go ahead and shield them. The genetic effects are cumulative, therefore it is necessary to protect the child's gonads from radiation, which may produce deleterious effects in their offspring. Now, let me go back here real quick. Lead equivalency. The main component is lead for the shields. Okay? But it can also be any material, so here's the catch, guys. It can be any material that has the same attenuating properties as 0.5 millimeters of lead. It can be any material, as long as it has the same attenuating properties as 0.5 millimeters of lead. Okay? All right, number 2 is artifacts.
Wow.
Yeah, I downloaded this just to give you guys an example. Okay? If you took an x-ray and you have all these artifacts in your radiograph, are you going to be able to see anything? No. Okay? They get in the way. And if you have artifacts in your radiograph, you got to go back and do it again. Okay? So it is important to remove all clothing, bandages, and diapers. Again, we're talking about pediatrics here. Remove all clothing, bandages, and diapers from the area to be examined. Because diapers can show up. Pins can show up. Clothing can show up. Okay? So we want to remove anything that can cause artifacts because they will show up and this will result in repeat exposure. Okay? Number 3 is motion. For children, highlight this, for children, For children, motion is going to account for more repeated radiographs than anything else. It doesn't matter if it's film radiography or computed radiography. Kids will move. They don't follow directions very well. They are going to move. So that accounts for the #1 repeat in both film and computer radiography, for both. So the use of cooperation, we're building good rapport. Okay, one of the ways we can build good rapport is by talking with them, and you talk to them at a level that they can understand. My communication skills are going to be quite different with a 2-year-old than it would be a 15-year-old. Okay, so talk at their level so they understand. Show them the room. Tell them what you're going to do. Let them play with the equipment. What you're doing here is you're trying to decrease the amount of fear and anxiety with the child. This is communication. Number 2 is short exposure times. If we can get quick exposure times, we may eliminate any type of movement on our radiograph. This is what movement looks like. See how fuzzy and blurry it is? Okay. We want to eliminate that with children. Then we're going to use immobilization devices, sponges, tape, Velcro,
Pigostat.
sandbags, pigostats. Okay, we'll talk about pigostats later. Okay, and then also possible sedation. We usually don't like to medicate our kids. Sometimes we have to, but we want to try to avoid that at all costs. Because what you want to do here is we're trying to eliminate motion, trying to eliminate any type of repeat x-rays. Okay?
Is there any age of a ped where you don't take x-rays? Like
We take them all. Doesn't matter, even neonates.
Neonates.
Yep, few hours, couple of days, we're still taking x-rays. Okay? Patient holding. So we only hold patients only on emergencies. Highlight this. When all other resources have failed, are we going to hold? If we use quick exposure times, if we use tape, Velcro, even some sedation, if we used all our resources and the child is still moving, we're going to need to hold. Okay? But this is only as a very last resort when all resources have been utilized, have been used up. Okay? We don't do this on a routine basis. Huh?
Sorry, who holds the kids or adults? I mean, is it
Yeah, who's going to hold? Who's going to hold is usually a family member.
if they don't have a family?
Okay, if we don't have a family member, then it's going to be a technologist. I've held in many procedures. Yeah, I have held in many procedures. Yeah, but we're talking about pediatrics here, so there's usually a caregiver or a parent that is available. And first off, students cannot hold. Okay, so if you're going through the program, you have a difficult patient, and your senior tech says, I want you to hold this patient while I take an x-ray, what are you going to do?
No.
You say no, and if we find out that you've held, we're going to discipline you as well as that tech, and there's a possibility that you may get kicked out of the program.
I ain't holding nobody.
Okay? So you don't hold under any circumstances as a student. Okay, so going back to what we're saying here, is family members, they're usually the one to hold, so if they're going to be in the room, we're also going to shield them too. Okay? Because there's no need for more than one individual in the room to get exposed with one shot. All right? So we're going to shield them as well. This is what happens when you hold, right? Scatter radiation. You can be holding the child off to the side, and you're going to get hit with scatter radiation. There's no doubt that whenever you're in the room, unless you're practicing safe distances, if you are close to either the source, or patient can be a source too, right? A scatter radiation. So we're talking about x-ray tube and patient. If you are within the vicinity of those sources, you are going to get hit with radiation. No doubt about it. Okay? I know I'm getting exposed on the job every time I step into the cardiac cath lab room. Okay? But the thing is, I know how to minimize that exposure, and I'm still standing here talking to you guys, right? You know, I'm actually 65.
No, you're not.
Okay, this is what radiation does. Okay, it's good stuff. All right, so when you're holding the patient, okay, number one thing is you don't want to be in the path of the primary beam, and you want to position yourself so that you are going to minimize the amount of scatter radiation that you're going to receive. And one of that, to prevent scatter radiation from interacting with your body, is to be shielded as well. We'll talk about shielding here in just a little bit. Okay, so again, to minimize motion, let's talk about some of the resources. Sandbags. This is an immobilization device known as a tandem board. Tandem board. It's basically just plastic, some Velcro. The material is radiolucent, so we can shoot right through the material and the X-rays will interact with the image receptor.
So the film goes right there under the...
It goes right underneath. And we can adjust this too. You can see that there are some slats in there, so we can move this tabletop up and down. Okay? We can also lay them in this position, but we'll put it beside them so we can do a sideways shot of the child. Okay? But then again, we just recall here, this is all plastic, guys. Okay? And the reason why I say that is, I'll let you know here in a little bit. Here's a pigostat. Yes?
What, T-A-N or M?
Tammon board.
Okay, so it is, okay.
Yeah, Tammon board, Okay, pigostats. This is another type of immobilization device, which is, we've got one actually one up here. Okay, it's so old, the wheels are coming off. Okay, this is a pigostat. Okay, am I losing another wheel?
No, you're good.
Okay, child sits on this bicycle seat. Then we're going to raise their arms up. We'll put the radiolucent material around them. Okay, it's plexiglass. We're going to strap them in with some leather. Okay, film sits right up in here. So let's just say here's the film. It's got a slot for the film to hold, a film holder. And then we can do front views, and we can also rotate this. Put the film here again, and we can also do a side view.
So is it mainly used for like chest x-rays? Or?
This is usually used for chest x-rays and some abdomens. Okay. The whole key here is, again, although it looks bad,
Looks real bad.
it looks real bad. You know,
But
especially if you have a parent in the room, they're saying, what the heck are you doing with my kid? Right, so they're just giving you that stink eye.
But it minimizes the
So
exposure.
when we do this, I'll ask the parent to help me first get them in the seat, because they're going to be wiggly and squiggly, right? So they're going to help me get them in here. And once I've got them strapped and on board, I'll tell the parent to leave. Yeah, I'm done with you. Okay. But the key here is making sure that you don't move, because I would rather them cry and yell and scream and get it done the first time than having to go back and do it again. Because now you have to go back and repeat the exposure. And you got to tell a parent, you know what, I need to take another picture. Why? Well, because they moved. You don't want to do that, right? I would rather have them give me the stink eye for putting their child in here than give me the stink eye for another dose of radiation. Okay? This is the Positod. I swear, I think these are all like Photoshopped, because I've never had a kid in any of these situations where they were smiling.
He looked
and
kind of mad at
laughing.
the sandbag kid.
Never, never, ever, ever. Okay, some positioning blocks. Okay, these are positioning blocks to help keep our patients in position while we're taking X-rays. We have various sizes and different shapes. Different sizes and different shapes. Here's a sandbag that I've got in my left hand. We've got sponges. Okay, basically just angular sponges. And again, we have them in different shapes and sizes. Now, if you want to make some money, this is kind of a sidetrack here. If you guys want to make some money, invent something, call it medical, and you make $1 million. Okay? These sponges here, it's just basically foam, guys. If you can get a block of foam and just cut it into different sides, you can sell this. Guess what? How much we purchased this for? Yep, $250.
No way.
$250 for this. $250.
Ingenious.
Okay. Yeah, so I actually have a couple of friends who went into medical devices, and they're doing very good because they basically found a need in X-ray departments, made it, marketed it, and sold it, and now they're making pretty good money.
Because like even as advanced as it is, there's still a lot of room for improvement, right?
Oh, always. I mean, look at this. This dude.
Yeah.
And dudettes. Plastic, Velcro. Come on, really? 244? Look at this. Okay, again, just boards and Velcro, 292. So what I did was when I was in the hospital, I'd pick up like a cleaner that say Clorox on it, and I compare it with the ingredients of the Clorox that they sell at the supermarket.
Same stuff.
Same exact ingredients, but they've marked it up 300, 400% for the same cleaner. All right. So if this doesn't work out for you, this is what you're going to do. Okay? All right, sandbags. Tape. Tape is going to be your best friend as a technologist.
That's a mad baby right
Tape.
there.
Yeah. You go to, if you're looking for tape, just go up into any rad tech. They will have tape. Okay? I had the students coming in here one time and I said, hey, do you happen to have any tape on you? I'm like, yeah, there you go. What size? Okay? Tape is going to be your best friend. It's going to be the most accessible type of immobilization device that you will find. Okay? Mummifying, here we are swaddling the child. I call it burritos. Collimation. Proper collimation is an extremely important technical consideration even in children, because when we are collimating or limiting the size of the beam, first of all, we are controlling primary radiation size, right? But aren't we also controlling the amount of scattered radiation?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So even small increases in the field size for the area of interest can dramatically increase the total exposure. It is important to collimate to the size of the anatomy you're going to x-ray. So even if my film was 8 by 10 and the child's hand was 3 by 3, I am not going to open up the collimator to the size of my image receptor. It makes no sense. Okay? So collimate to the size of the anatomy you're going to radiograph. Grids. Okay, we just had a test on grids, right? Grids are not necessary when exposing infants due to the small volume being irradiated. When do we use grids?
When it's 10
Body parts
10
10 centimeters or greater. Children are not usually that thick and they're not going to be that dense. So most of the time we won't use a grid. However, there are some circumstances where you are going to use a grid. If you have to use a grid, okay, yes, we are going to increase our technical factors by a little bit, right? Okay, but it's not significant enough that we should be concerned about it. And if you are going to use a grid, do you want to use a 16:1 grid or a 5:1 grid?
5-to-1?
Why 5:1?
For lower technical factors.
Okay, so lower technical factors and greater margin of error, right?
And there's not like a PED grid, it's just all the same
They're
kind
all
of...
the same grids, okay? So again, you want to use a lower grid ratio. You can use lower technical factors, okay? It's going to be slightly higher than without one, but again, we want a nice looking film, okay? This is where we're going to make the sacrifice. And lower grid ratio will allow for more error. So if your tube is angled a certain way, or if your image receptor is angled a certain way, you're not going to get grid cutoff. Okay, number 6 is personnel and parental protection. Sometimes personal, or preferably the parents, must physically restrain the infant toddler during the radiation exposure. It is important to remember that scattered radiation from these exams usually are very low. However, we still want to protect who's ever in the room. Okay, here again are some examples. You got your lead apron, gloves, some glasses, lead aprons, gloves, cool looking lead glasses, thyroid shield. Now, the apron isn't enough because our parts as, like, just say, technologists, we may also need to protect our eyes and also our thyroid because those are the two structures that are very sensitive to radiation. Okay? Your eyes and your thyroid are going to be two structures that are very sensitive to radiation.